The movie is set in a dystopian future where machines have seamlessly integrated into all aspects of human life. The world relies almost entirely on technology to perform even the simplest of tasks. But our protagonist, Grey Trace, stands out as someone who has not fully embraced the technological revolution and still works as a traditional mechanic. He is married to Asha, who works for a major tech company called Cobalt, which specializes in human augmentations. One evening, after finishing up with a car repair, Grey urges Asha to accompany him as he delivers the vehicle to his client. This is because he needs to use her self-driving car on the way home. Asha isn't interested, as she has other things to do, but he somehow convinces her to come along. Not long after, the couple arrives at a remote location with two large rocks near the sea. They then descend toward it and eventually reach a luxurious facility hidden inside. There, they meet Grey's client, Aaron, who turns out to be a tech genius and billionaire who apparently doesn't lock his doors. Asha is thrilled to see him and reveals that she's a huge fan of his work. However, Aaron greets her awkwardly and admits that he lacks social skills because he rarely leaves this place. After that, Aaron shows the couple his latest invention, a microchip called STEM. He reveals that this small device is capable of performing any task better than a human and has the potential to change the world. This amazes Asha, but Grey remains unimpressed and refuses to believe it will benefit humans. He instead emphasizes how damaging it could be and can result in an unemployment crisis, just like he'll be unemployed if he keeps shit-talking his rich, powerful client's inventions. Later, on the way home, Grey complains about these advancements, fearing that they will make people like him useless. However, Asha asks him not to be rude to Aaron, since he is Grey's last paying customer. She then tries to get intimate with him as the self-driving car drives them home, but their romantic moment is cut short when Grey notices that the car is heading in a different direction. The couple orders it to reroute and even tries to hit the brake, but the vehicle ignores their commands. Shortly after, they arrive in a crime-ridden neighborhood where the car crashes and causes an accident. Four men then approach and drag the couple away from the vehicle. Meanwhile, a police drone can be seen recording the events. Grey begs for mercy and even offers money, but a guy named Frisk starts laughing. He then approaches Asha and says he hates privileged people like her before shooting her in the chest. Grey attempts to fight back, but Frisk shoots him as well, leaving him completely paralyzed. After this, the thugs leave, while Grey helplessly watches his wife die before his eyes. The scene then cuts to 3 months later, where Grey is still paralyzed in the hospital. His mother arrives to take him home in a wheelchair, and new machines are installed in the house to help him. However, Grey is deeply distraught over his wife's death and struggles to move on. Later, he and his mother visit the police station where they meet Detective Cortez. Grey inquires about his wife's murderers, but Cortez reveals that there hasn't been any progress in the case. This enrages Grey, who criticizes how technology can read chips in people's dental fillings, but still can't track down a group of thugs. However, Cortez reveals that criminals have discovered a way to create a firewall around the systems, making it impossible to identify them. One day, while Grey is alone at home, he tries to unalive himself by overdosing on his medication. He soon passes out, but the house's automated system detects the situation and summons an ambulance. Later, we see Grey in the hospital, and Aaron comes to see him. He feels sorry for Grey's situation and suggests that he get a STEM microchip implanted in his body, which will allow him to walk again. Aaron explains that he'll need to undergo surgery and that this must remain a secret from the authorities. An annoyed Grey states that he doesn't want to restart his life and would rather end it. However, Aaron advises him to consider what Asha would have wanted him to do. Hearing this, Grey falls into deep thought and eventually agrees to the procedure. In the next scene, we see Grey at Aaron's facility, where a few doctors are implanting the chip into him. When the procedure is complete, he is shocked to see his limbs and hands moving normally. Aaron is overjoyed with the outcome and asks him to sign a non-disclosure agreement. Grey obliges without hesitation and even agrees to continue pretending to be paralyzed. Upon returning home, Grey finds a parcel from Detective Cortez containing evidence related to his case. It turns out to be the drone footage of his wife's death. After watching the video, Grey feels anxious and sips a glass of alcohol. Moments later, he suddenly hears a voice speaking to him. The voice introduces itself as STEM, which shocks our hero. He thinks he's gone insane, but STEM assures him that he's not. The AI also explains that Grey is the only person who can hear the voice, since it communicates through vibrations in his eardrum. After this, STEM points out some strange details in the drone footage footage. It turns out the attackers didn't have guns and shot Asha with augmented hands, which sounds way less convenient than guns. Stem also notices a tattoo on one of the men's wrists, which turns out to be a military barcode. The AI then scans the barcode and instantly identifies the perpetrator, who turns out to be a Marine named Cirque Brentner. Grey decides to tell Cortez about this, but Stem persuades him not to call her, arguing that the tattoo alone is insufficient evidence. Instead, the AI suggests that Grey visit Cirque in prison to discover the truth. In the next scene, Grey arrives at Cirque's address and breaks into his house. He finds a laptop on the table and reads his messages, but finds no useful information aside from repeated mentions of a local bar called Old Bones. He also discovers proof that the man was upgraded with cybernetic implants and is a bionic assassin. Not long after, Cirque arrives at the house, and Grey quickly hides in a corner. Unfortunately for him, the man notices his presence because he hides like a dumb idiot, and then begins to attack him. Grey attempts to find answers about his wife's death, but Cirque continues beating him mercilessly. Just when it seems Grey's going to bite the dust, he summons Stem for help. This prompts the AI to take control of his body and kill Cirque in a horrific manner. In the aftermath, Grey has given back control of his body, and he's horrified by what he's done. He vomits in the sink, but the ruthless AI urges him to remove his traces before the cops show up. Later, a medical examiner and Detective Cortez inspect Cirque's body in the morgue. They discover a large number of implants, including a battle barrel embedded in his left hand. The medical examiner then reveals that they found traces of shoes smeared with old machine oil in Cirque's home. This shocks the detective, and she assumes it must be the work of a mechanic. It's gotta be that goddamn paralyzed grease monkey. In another scene, Grey arrives at Aaron's house for a routine checkup, but the latter seems very angry. He informs Grey that he's been tracking his movements and discovered that he has killed a man today. Aaron accuses him of misusing his technology and reminds him of the non-disclosure agreement. In response, Grey also scolds him for not revealing that Stem can actually talk to people. This surprises Aaron, and he simply advises Grey to use the AI with caution. Meanwhile, Cortez reviews the drone footage outside Cirque's house and is shocked to see Grey in a wheelchair. She later visits him and informs him of Cirque's death, noting that the man was a suspect in his wife's murder. She then questions why he was seen outside Cirque's house near the time of the murder. Grey explains that he was trying to help with the investigation, but he didn't actually do anything since he's physically disabled. Surprisingly, the detective buys his story and leaves without any further questions. Afterward, Grey decides to visit the bar, Old Bones, which Cirque used to frequent. He shows up with his wheelchair and quickly gathers everyone's attention. Grey reveals that his wife was murdered a few months ago and urges anyone with information to come forward. He also mentions that a man named Cirque was involved in the killing, but he is now dead. Hearing this, a guy named Tolan approaches Grey. Tolan does a really fake-sounding laugh, like this. And leads him to the restroom along with his henchmen. When they arrive, Tolan pushes Grey out of his chair and holds him at knife point. However, the latter claims he only wants to know who is responsible for his wife's murder. He then asks Tolan if he was there that evening, and the man proudly confirms it. Upon hearing this, Grey immediately asks Stem to take control and begins attacking the thugs in the room. After knocking everyone down, he pins Tolan to the ground and begins slashing his face until he finally agrees to speak. Tolan confesses that a man named Fisk ordered them to murder Grey's wife. At this moment, Stem warns Grey that Aaron is attempting to manually shut him down, which would render him paralyzed again. The AI then directs him to a nearby hacker named Jamie and provides her address. While Grey is noting down the address, Tolan succumbs to his injuries and dies. Grey then leaves his wheelchair outside the bar and starts running towards Jamie's building. Along the way, Stem begins to lose control over his body, making him very weak. Meanwhile, at the bar, Fisk and his henchmen find the murdered Tolan. Fisk then scans the pupils of the dead man and learns about the perpetrator. Soon, Grey reaches Jamie's apartment and asks her to remove Stem's input guard. It turns out, input guards are part of the programming that keeps the AI from operating autonomously. Once the guard is removed, Aaron is unable to turn off Stem remotely. Jamie successfully removes the input guard, but reveals that the system will take some time to restart. Just then, she notices Fisk and his accomplice heading into her apartment via surveillance cameras and decides to flee. Shortly after, the bad guys arrive to capture Grey, and at the same time, Aaron's security team also shows up. It appears that our hero is going to meet his wife in heaven, but Stem regains control just in time. This allows Grey to get back on his feet and rush towards the rooftop. The henchman begins following him, while Fisk remains behind to fight Aaron's security team team in the elevator. On the rooftop, the henchman attacks Grey, resulting in a fierce fight between the two, but Grey eventually blows off the man's head with his own bionic arm gun. Things are so useless, and manages to escape. In the next scene, Grey returns home covered in blood, and his mother is shocked to see him walking. He then finally tells her the truth about STEM and asks her to keep it a secret. Detective Cortez also arrives at the house shortly after, claiming she discovered Grey's wheelchair at the bar, where several people were murdered. She asks what happened, to which he lies that he followed someone to the bar but was beaten and tortured. Fortunately, he managed to escape in a taxi and returned home. Cortez pretends to believe his story, but deep down, she knows something's up. Therefore, she secretly drops an audio transmitter into his coat pocket before leaving. Later, a stressed out Grey says he wants to put a stop to their killing spree, but STEM insists on killing Fisk. It reveals that it has found Fisk's address, and they can go there to finish him right now. Grey refuses, but the AI explains that it no longer requires his permission to operate his body. It turns out that removing the input guard not only separated STEM from Aaron, but also gave it autonomy, allowing it to do whatever it wants. STEM justifies its actions by stating that if they don't act, Fisk will eventually hunt down and kill Grey, with no other option. He finally agrees to the AI's plan and leaves the house. Meanwhile, Detective Cortez also overhears the conversation and decides to follow him. After driving for a while, Grey discovers the listening device in his pocket and notices Cortez following him. STEM attempts to hack her car but fails because it's mechanical. However, it successfully hacks into one of the electric cars on the highway and crashes it into the detectives. This causes a minor accident, allowing Grey to drive away from there. In the aftermath, a wounded Cortez goes to Grey's house and confronts his mother about his actions. Meanwhile, Grey finally arrives at Fisk's apartment and holds him at gunpoint. The latter responds calmly, revealing that they were not actually targeting Asha, but Grey himself. He admits that he didn't shoot Grey with real bullets that night. It was just something to paralyze him. He then urges him to embrace these new powers and join their side. However, Grey is only concerned with getting his revenge and attacks Fisk. The two men then engage in a fierce brawl, and it turns out Fisk's abilities are far more powerful than Grey's. He is almost about to kill Grey when STEM suddenly provides crucial information, revealing that Cirque is actually Fisk's brother. Hearing this, Grey taunts Fisk about how he killed his brother by ripping his mouth open. The revelation makes Fisk emotional, and Grey seizes the moment to attack him. He then finally kills the villain by smashing his head against some glass. Afterward, he scans Fisk's phone and finds a shocking voicemail from Aaron, who is instructing him to kill Grey. In the following scene, Grey arrives at Aaron's lab and accuses him of deliberately crippling him and murdering his wife for his experiment. He attempts to shoot Aaron, but just then Cortez arrives and holds him at gunpoint. The two then get into a fight, and Grey begs STEM not to harm the detective, but when he realizes that the AI is not going to stop, he persuades Cortez to use her stun gun on him. The plan works, and the impact is able to temporarily turn off STEM. After this, Aaron admits to Grey that it was actually STEM who planned everything and forced him to comply. STEM wanted a host body and chose Grey as its carrier because he had no implants or chips, which is rare in this world. The AI caused the accident and sent the thugs to paralyze Grey. Aaron reveals that STEM's ultimate goal is to kill him so that he can no longer create any more microchips. He then tearfully explains that he's not in control of the company and was simply taking instructions from AI. It started with deepfakes of Trump and Obama playing COD. I've no idea how it came to this. At this moment, STEM regains control of Grey and brutally kills Aaron by stabbing him in the head. It then prepares to finish off Cortez, but Grey abruptly aims the gun to his own neck. The scene then cuts to a hospital, where Grey wakes up and finds himself moving his body normally. Moments later, Asha enters the ward and explains that they were in an accident and he had been unconscious for a few days. Grey finds this hard to believe, but despite his confusion, they share a kiss. Just then, the scene returns to Aaron's house, where Cortez instructs Grey to lower the gun. However, STEM reveals that there is no longer a Grey. It explains that his consciousness is now trapped in virtual reality, where he is happy with his wife in a fictitious world. STEM further reveals that it only needed to break Grey's mind to lock him in his subconscious, allowing it to control his body. After saying this, STEM coldly shoots Cortez to death and removes the traces of the knife and gun. The movie ends as the AI then nonchalantly walks away, while we see Grey kissing his wife in the imaginary world. Subscribe for more videos like this, turn on notifications, and leave a like to help the channel out. Thank you for watching.